We have quite a tough act to follow, actually. We were just talking over here about the pop culture phenomenon of 2018. And I know that to start off this session with Lyndon Neri, we actually want to bring you a quote from a philosopher. So, which is quite a change of pace, but I promise you it is relevant to the architectural projects that we are about to discuss. So this is from Svetlana Boym. Would you like to read us the quote from her?
Yes, first, good morning, Singapore. I'm a little bit under the weather, so forgive me if I'm a little bit slow in my reaction. But let me read sort of to put in context of what we're discussing today. Svetlana Boym, the Harvard scholar, talks about restorative nostalgia in relationship to reflective nostalgia. Restorative nostalgia is more literal and direct. By comparison, it's a trans-historical reconstruction of the lost home and does not think itself as nostalgia, rather as truth and tradition. Reflective nostalgia, which we as a practice believed in, thrives on the longing itself and delays the homecoming wistfully. Ironically, desperately, it does not follow a single plot, but explores way of inhabiting many places at once. In imagining different time zone, it loves details, not symbols.
All right. So reflective nostalgia is taken from Svetlana Boym, but also a principle that has informed the architecture and design of Neri Hu. Now, you are a practice that is headquartered in Shanghai, and a lot of your work is thus rooted in Chinese culture and context. So I know that to start off with, we would like to show a few slides that talk about contemporary China, both its urban environment and also the places within China that have been left behind in the economic boom. So should we take a look at some images here? There's a photo of Chongqing by Nadav Kandra.
So between 2000 to 2010, I think you can see in the slide, urban land expanded by 83%. Urban population grew 45%. So to the right, to the left, on your left is Nadav Kandra's image of Chongqing, which is considered a concrete jungle, and Jia Zhangke's film on the new notion of urbanity. By 2020, 60% of China's population will be living in urban areas. That's approximately 800 million people. And this goes to show you a new way of looking at urban leisure. Imagine kids growing up in these kind of conditions, thinking that that is the romantic way of spending the weekend. It's very powerful, quite visceral image, you can kind of see. Yet also, not just urban issues, but rural issues are quite crucial and critical. Between 2000 to 2010, the number of villages dropped from 3.7 million to 2.6 million, an average of 300 villages lost per day. Not from demolition, which people would predict from China, but from people leaving the rural areas to cities, because there are better jobs, better opportunities, and they leave their parents and their children to conditions like this. Only 40% of rural migrants are willing to return to their farms, only 3% among those born after 1990. And I think that empty chairs shows you that people that have left the villages and do not come back anymore. Bricklayers, farmers who are good at what they do, they go to cities and becomes janitor or doing other menial tasks that are not relevant. They end up being very bitter and not seeing their children until Chinese New Year. So 1 out of 6 families in China have been evicted and relocated since 1990s. Why are we showing you all this? Because these are the conditions that we have to deal with as a practice, and these are also conditions in which every countries around the world have to deal with, obviously exacerbated in China, but oftentimes we think about the future and constantly think about moving forward without really thinking about the past. And the past, to us, from a reflective vein, is just as important as thinking of the future. And so these are some of the projects. I think some of you are probably familiar. In fact, this is a Singaporean developer and hotelier. So I just kind of want to show you homage to Singapore. It took a Singaporean developer and hotelier to have the vision to come to China and do a crazy project like this.
So which year was it when you created
This was done,
project?
TF, about 8 years ago. In fact, my mother, I have an interesting quote because my mother came and saw this project. First thing she asked, "Son, is this complete?" I said, "Yes, it is complete." The next question was, did the client pay you in full? And so I said, "Yes, the client paid me in full." And my mother turned to me and he goes, "You're either a genius or the client is extremely stupid." So even your own mother cannot accept the past that we believe is the essence of all the travelers that need to come to this city. In fact, we lost two major projects after this was completed because our clients decided that this aesthetic was not according to the vein of what they're going after and that we were probably not the right architect. I was really depressed because I took a stand on trying to create something new, trying to create something. The government questioned us for 2 years. The third year, they decided that this was going to be the front cover of Shanghai's tourism to attract people to come. Obviously, it helped when Lady Gaga decided to book the whole hotel, all 19 rooms, by herself with all security. So all of a sudden, this became, in Chinese term, red hot.
But what was the condition in which you found this building? I know that it is a 1930s building that used to be run by the Japanese army, like during the age of the occupation. So what had it become before it was transformed?
There were three different storage spaces, warehouses, and we kind of connected them. In fact, one of the brief by the Chinese partner from the Singaporean developer and hotelier had another Chinese partner. The first thing he had asked me to do was, would you be interested, the first call was, would you be interested in doing something on the Bund? So naturally we were interested because I thought, my egotistical side in me thought there were the 33 building along the Bund. I was wrong, it was south of Bund, it was really dilapidated. But the second question startled me even more. He's like, can you demolish this whole building and give me Mayfair, London? Which shocked me to my core. And obviously I said, you know what, you can save this by saving 50% of the construction costs. All Chinese like to have, less construction costs, so I got approval.
Yeah, so it's about the financial incentives.
Even though my agenda was different, I think oftentimes as architect you have to lie.
Yeah.
You want me to show the other project?
Yes, let's do that, because it brings us to a very different context as well, whereas the Waterhouse, which we looked at just now, was in Shanghai. Like, this is a more suburban, rural project.
This is a rural project. That was a city project. This just completed last year, and we were really fortunate enough to have won many awards. We've taken all the recycled brick from all the 12 different areas around this particular city in Tsingpu, which is about 3 hours away, Yangzhou, 3 hours away from Shanghai. And we took all the bricks, and in many ways, all the neighboring demolished bricks were here in this particular hotel. So you see this reception and exterior of that project.
So one of the things that you notice when you look at this project, The Walled, is that it can actually be quite tricky to tell what is old and what is new, which is one of the great strengths of the project, that you're integrating the history of the place so beautifully. So can you talk a little bit about, again, how did you come across the site and what was there when you first stepped in?
The developer was very interesting. He argued that in China you cannot just save historical sites that are prominent. For instance, the Great Wall, the Summer Palace, those are important. But he argued that rural areas also have destinations that are of interest, and they are relevant to the community within them. And so he assembled 12 sites, convinced the government that they are worth saving. So this is along the Silver Lake, perhaps not as important from a size point of view, because it's smaller, but he argued that it's equally as strong as, say, the West Lake in Hangzhou. And he commissioned 12 different architects Some of them, for instance, his first project was in Xiamen, which is too low, the round buildings. And he brought this whole round building and reconstructed an interesting sort of phenomena within it.
I know that we have a video
Yeah,
that shows us the experience of actually going through the wall as well. And as we look through, you will see how the brick walls that you've constructed within this space actually frame the views, but also give you a sense of hierarchy and blend exterior and interior.
So we use the typology of Yangzhou, which is a walled city. If you look at the traditional Yangzhou architecture, it's a series of wall, and along the wall, the community, the children run around this wall, and the houses are within the wall. And what we did was we took sort of that typology, the predominant typology within that city, and inserted this wall in an existing site on some of the buildings that we could not remove. And the wall itself became, in many ways, the grid and the guiding force that holds the whole project together.
Now, the work of Neri Hu, as we were saying as we began this session, is about reflective nostalgia. It is about acknowledging that the places where we work have a past, an architectural past, but also a human past. And it's about engaging proactively with context as you dream up new projects for that location. Now, that may come a little bit more naturally when you're working within China, because both you and Rosanna, your partner in life and work, come from Chinese families. Now, what does that mean when you work at an international level and you're a foreign architect, going to a place that you're not necessarily familiar with? Like, how do you begin your research process to make sure that what you're creating in this new space has the integrity that people would expect?
Our practice is called Neri Hu Design and Research Practice, partly because we believe in research. I think taste is very subjective, what is beautiful, what is not beautiful, and what's important is the idea. And so we often strive for the idea. There is this phrase by French philosopher Antoine de Saint-Exupéry that we really like as a practice. It says, "We do not aspire to be eternal beings. We only hope that things do not lose its meaning and purpose." Oftentimes, practicing in Shanghai and in China, we're given many glamorous projects. High-rises, high-end brands. In fact, last year, we had over 400 requests to do projects. We only took on 15 because obviously, one, we can't take all of them. But second, we really have to think through the process whether we actually can do them and do them well. And so the research arm of our practice is key. And so with projects like, now we have projects in Stockholm, in Porto, in London, in Cologne, we actually send a team over and understand the context in which we are practicing. For the project in London, it was a competition that we had won, and it was the Bow Street Magistrate Courthouse across from the Opera House. And that took us close to, during the competition stage, 3 months on researching what this sort of Bow Street runners means, when Oscar Wilde was imprisoned there, and all that context. So I think it's important as a foreign architect, when we are practicing, we're doing a house here. And obviously, the condition that we do here is very different from where we would do it in Shanghai, for instance. The weather is very different, the living condition, the way people move in and out of the building. Obviously, the idea behind needs to be interesting, but the context that we are practicing in needs to be taken into play as we design.
And I think one of the things that allows you to respond so sensitively to context is also the fact that Neri Hu not only create architecture, but you do a lot of interiors as well. And in fact, I believe you had mentioned that a lot of people first know you as interior design practice and then realize that there's more to it as well. And do you think it is important for architects and interior designers to work as a cohesive unit, to create a Gesamtkunstwerk, as we would say, as opposed to working independently?
Obviously, it's nothing new. The Renaissance did it. During the Bauhaus movement, they did it again. Your phrase is very accurate. But for us, it's a matter of survival. We went to China not thinking that we were going to do all of them. But to us, with crazy Chinese client that wants everything done within 10 days or yesterday, we decided that by offering many different multidisciplinary aspects to a design, it allows us, one, it buys us time. Second, it gives us the sense of control. Or third, it deviates us from the real issue. So when they have problems with our architecture, I try to deviate them and talk about interior issue. When they have problems with our interior proposal, we deviate them and talk about product design. And then we also do graphic. We also do urban planning. People often say, wow, you're doing all these, but really it's a way to control. It's a total design. And we find it actually quite liberating.
And I wanted to talk to you about sustainability, which I know, of course, is a buzzword that is thrown around all the time when it comes to architecture and design, and I'm sure that it's been uttered 50 times on the stage in the past 2 days already. What does sustainability mean to you beyond just choosing materials that are responsibly sourced and will stand the test of time?
I think that's a very good question, TF. I think definitely sustainability is very important. It should be a given in every practice. But more importantly, I believe there's something that's even more sustainable. And that's why we talk about this reflective nostalgia vein, is to go back and learn from the older generation. Learn from your parents, learn from your grandparents. As younger generation, we tend to think that we have to keep moving forward and moving faster and faster. And sometimes out of efficiency, or perhaps we're too busy, we put our grandmothers or grandparents in foster care or nursing home. Our parents are left to take care of our children. But in many ways, the wisdom that comes from them are actually quite sustainable. And many of that wisdom that comes out of that generation will help us to move forward, to understand. In fact, technology should help us because of memory. It was just 2 days ago, it was my son's birthday, and I didn't really know what to write to him. It was interesting, Facebook reminded me what I wrote 2 years ago, and thank goodness it did, because I would have repeated myself out of laziness, or perhaps out of the fact that I have to write just for the sake of writing. I compared the notes, and thank goodness I didn't send it to him because it was almost the same. All right, so technology does help. But technology is just a tool to an end. And we have to remember that technology moves us forward, but technology also allows us to look at backwards. And don't forget the past. Not as a restorative vein, when we just completely do things according a Disneyfication of history, for instance, a copy of what it is to monumentalize things, but to actually wistfully understand the essence of why, when your grandmother held your hand and said, continue to draw, son, continue to draw, my lovely son, you will do well. All those community, when you were playing with kids, why, when you were playing in that alleyway and you were free and you were happy, why that community was important. I think the essence of history should be brought in our everyday and the mundane and the ordinary for us to move forward.
And I think that's an important principle to keep in mind as well, not only when we think of architecture, but also when we think of the ways in which we design communities and design systems, and the ways in which we interact with each other. The value of the sense of clan, the sense of community that you get from a village environment that we were looking at just now is important to keep in mind, as we look to the future and as we look to what new things we are building. So, and to that extent, I would like to say that reflective nostalgia is a principle that we can apply, not only in architecture, but towards all of design in general. I think we need to wrap up. So thank you so much for joining us today, Lyndon.
Thank you.